Hey guys, we're back for round 2A of debate. It's your favorite host, Max, and your other favorite host.
Dima.
And so we have a few results from the last 3 rounds of debate, oral interpretation, and original oratory. So in the debate rounds, um, in no no no, in debate rounds, A, what is A? One sec. Budapest won one, lost one, and Moscow won one and lost one. Helsinki won one and lost one, so looks like they're all doing relatively similarly. Sofia got 2 wins. Good for Sofia. Belgrade has 2 wins. Vilnius has 2 wins. Kiev, the home team, 2 losses. And Baku has 2 wins. So far there's some variation in the results, but this is just the first round of debate. People have a chance to catch up and change it up by the time of the finals. As for the other events, oral interpretation and original oratory, here are the standings. Just to remind you, there are 2 judges, right? And they accumulate their score of up to 30, so the maximum amount of points one speaker can get is 60. And so, yeah, Budapest looks like their scores are 42, 50, 39. Moscow has 51, 47, 54, 39, 31. Helsinki is doing well too, 44, 34. Sofia with 54, 55, 54 again, and 45. Those are really strong scores, by the way. Just 15 shy of the maximum. I think those, you can't beat that, really. Sofia's done well in debate and oral interpretation so far. And Istanbul is with 55, 48, 44, 50. Baku, 37, 59, 42. And the host team got 36. We have one oral interpreter. 36. We watched that one. You saw it. And, well, apparently that performance would equal to a 36 just as a reference. And then as for original oratory, not all the scores are out yet, but we can see that participants are also scoring between the 30s and 50s range. So what does this say to you, Dima?
Well, it's really too early to say anything because like we could talk about our predictions for the finals and stuff, but we have 2 more rounds, ladies and gentlemen, and like in those 2 rounds the main things will be decided of who will go to the finals and who could overwhelm their nervousness and became stronger with their statements. So me and Max, we were walking around this environment. We were talking to people, different coaches, participants. Most of them seems to be really confident, even though for some of them this is their first speech and debate CISA. So yeah.
Right, and so it is really high pressure because this is the kind of tournament that you can't just prepare for months. The debate resolutions, for example, are only released 10 weeks prior to the tournament, and sometimes they're changed around 4 weeks earlier. That's what the rulebook says. As for the other ones, well, the other ones, you know, how every year it switches between light and serious for duet acting and oral interpretation. Those ones, I guess, you could prepare earlier. But debate, you really can't. It's something that just, it's really time restrictive. Speaking of debate, it is about to start the second round of debate. And we'll be following on the live stream Budapest and Istanbul, with Istanbul on affirmative and Budapest on negative. Same contention. I mean, you know, same statement, which is should what was it? Should scarce resources be controlled by a supranational organization? Which I really think is an interesting question. And what would you have to say, Dima? Do you think that oil and gold and all that should be controlled by the UN?
Well, I'm not really knowing about this topic a lot, and if me and you are struggling to remember the name of this topic, I can imagine like much job did the participants make uh, to bring it to our tournament today. So, and it doesn't really matter how much you prepare in advance, but when you come into the new environment, like it all changes. So, like you can see a lot of people around you, like judges that you never saw before in your life, and uh, this comes to the skill of adaptation. And the faster you adapt to a new environment, the more successful you will be.
That's absolutely right, and yeah, tremendous effort from all of the participants here. And whenever we interviewed them, they made sure to tell us just how ready they are, how long they've been preparing. Lots of them were claimed they were too busy for interviews, which breaks my heart. But they have to do what they have to do, and they're all sitting there in the student lounge writing their papers, printing papers. It's absolutely hectic environment here, absolutely, and papers flying everywhere. I think everyone's really prepared, well prepared, or maybe not well prepared. Either way, they somehow just pull it off in the end. The performances that we've seen, they all step up there with such confidence, and they just perform. And I think that's the really great part. This tournament, for anyone who's, a bit nervous or stage frightful, this is an opportunity for them to step out of their comfort zone and start doing that. When was the first time you started acting and speaking in front of a camera?
Well, you mean how was it for the first time? Yeah. Well, I started when I was, I think, in elementary, like the last classes of elementary, and I was a really shy kid at that time, and I really struggled with that. But then, like years passed, and I realized the more practice you have, the more successful you become. And it's very important to practice, like frequently, like uh, do it all the time as much as you can. Yeah. And how many time do we have left till our round two debates?
Well, we're not sure how much time exactly. We are waiting for a judge to fill the room. Everybody's signing up. That's the word. Yeah, maybe you can hear them in the hallway. Down the hallway, they're screaming because everyone's running around. It's a bit crazy, really is, and that's the nature of this tournament, I guess. So, well, yeah, some people are a bit camera shy, and as you said, it's their first round doing a speech and debate CISA, but we'll be interviewing them again tomorrow, and we'll see if maybe that improved, or maybe that changed a bit, because, watching them in front of the judges, sometimes they're shaky, sometimes they're absolutely confident, but I think as we watch them progress as the rounds move on, round 1, 2, 3, I think everybody will just keep improving, and the quality of this tournament will just keep increasing. So stay tuned.
And the last preparations are happening in the room that we will be observing, uh, and we can see how the participants have this last moment where they can practice more, make some notes, like to not make mistakes that they made previously. So I think the second round will be very interesting to watch.
So there is a comment here. So we'd like to shout out a special viewer, Tanya Creek. I love watching the Moody Booth. Thank you. I like interviewing in the Moody Booth, and all the guests love the Moody Booth too. And the final preparations happening in the room. People are sitting down. The teams are Budapest and Istanbul. Budapest negative, Istanbul positive. Debating the topic: should a supernatural organization control scarce resources? Best of luck to them, and let's switch to the room.
Thanks. Good afternoon, honorable judges, esteemed opponents, and our audience. I am Lingling Lee from Istanbul International Community School, and I am joined by my partner, Do-won Kim. We will be taking on the affirmative side of this moot, which reads, scarce world resources should be controlled by an international organization. We would like to first and foremost define key terms, which are scarce world resources, control, and international organization. These definitions are taken and modified from Cambridge, Oxford, and Merriam-Webster dictionaries. World resources refer to natural resources, which are materials or substances occurring in nature which can be exploited for economic gain. Scarce resources, or resource scarcity, is the lack of availability of supplies required to maintain life or a certain quality of life, whereas control is the power to make decisions, exercise restraint, or direction over a subject. We define an international organization as a multinational cooperating agency with a common aim. I would like to make clear that I will be presenting the importance of the creation of this organization and our vision, whereas my partner Do-won Kim will elaborate on how the lack of such an organization controlling the world's resources has been an ongoing historical need through the example of the First and Second Congo Wars. This organization is extremely important, relevant, and needed in our society today. In 2003, the European Union's European Security Strategy concluded that competition for natural resources is an international challenge, and an international challenge should be met with an international response. This time, in the form of a cohesive, binding organization that can control the allocations of scarce natural resources. Moreover, the 2009 UNEP Expert Advisory Group on Security on Environment, Conflict, and Peacebuilding affirms that the resource scarcity is one of the greatest security risks of the 21st century. It can be seen extremely clearly that the world needs an international organization to allocate its natural resources to prevent the competition of resources from degenerating into conflict. In fact, my partner Do-won will elaborate on how scarce resources have repeatedly been a source of conflict throughout human history. We, the affirmative team, would now like to present our vision of the international organization that should control the world's scarce natural resources. We propose the creation of an international organization without any affiliations with any nation, which is the best solution to inadequate distribution of natural resources across the globe. Out of respect for their country's national sovereignty, nations may become a legally binding member of this organization at a voluntary or needed basis. This agency simply acts as a neutral organization for countries to trade their natural resources equitably, without exploitation or malicious intent. With leaders from various volunteered and experienced humanitarian aid organizations, such as Amnesty International and the Human Rights Watch, as well as the esteemed organization that has been combating corruption for the past 25 years, Transparency International, will also be partnered with our agency to fully prevent any chance of corruption as a precautionary measure. Moreover, the establishment of this organization is a step forward to a more level playing field in global economics. Earlier this year, we witnessed and are still witnessing how the world's two biggest trading nations announced a dueling tariff. The United States and China are now amidst a trade war, with tariffs on the opposing nations' goods rising as high as 35% more than normal. This is extremely disruptive to global trade due to the economic power the United States and China holds. Since the United States declared tariffs citing China's violation of fair trade policies, this would not have happened if our organization were in place. As our organization promotes fair trade through distributing resources according to need, it effectively eliminates chances for economic malpractice. Once our organization is implemented, no longer would politically influential countries be able to manipulate and exploit less economically developed countries. This is a more effective, peaceful, and long-term solution to economic disputes, which are essentially based on unequal resource distribution. In fact, our organization provides an alternative to the competitive and Western-dominated economy, an alternative that would end economic disputes by distributing the world's natural resources equitably from countries with an abundance of a resource, giving it to a country that lacks such resources, as it is everyone's human rights to access essential natural resources. Our organization would also foster better international relations, as economic security is no longer threatened, which is why we say that the United States and China would not be among a trade war now. Thus, we, the affirmative team, fully believe that our agency, as an international trade maker between countries of need, is a clear, peaceful, and mutually beneficial organization for the control of natural resources. My partner Do-won will demonstrate the deep historical need of our organization, whose existence could have prevented numerous resource conflicts, and she will also explain how the resource curse would be lifted by our organization effectively. Thank you.
Thank you for your speech. Could you please elaborate on your definition of an international organization?
An international organization is, as we propose, an organization partnered with the Human Rights Watch and Amnesty International with a common aim of eliminating economic malpractice and distributing resources equally across the globe.
Thank you. So who would comprise this international organization?
Any country who volunteers or needs this organization.
Okay, thank you. You said that this organization would trade equally without malicious intent, correct?
We stated that this organization will allow countries to trade without malicious intent, yes.
And by trade, you insinuate a lack of monetary compensation involved, as in trading one resource for another, or simply just purchase of resources?
This is more flexible, as resources would be ranked by different countries according to need. So a country with an abundance of one resource could give it to a country with less resources.
Thank you. You also elaborated on the China and USA trade war that you currently stated is ongoing. You mentioned that there were tariffs rising up to 35% on each other country. What were all the tariffs specifically placed on?
The tariffs were placed on various goods so for the United States, they were goods that China relied on them, and vice versa.
But were they scarce resources?
They are arguably scarce resources, as the respective countries targeted the resources that the opposing nation needs desperately.
Could you list some of these scarce resources that were targeted?
China targeted increased tariffs on the United States on agricultural products and machinery, which American farmers rely on Chinese producers.
Okay, thank you. Now, well, thank you, Delegate.
Okay, that was a very nice first affirmative speech with contentions and interesting questions as well from the negative team. And now it's on to the first negative speaker.
Ladies and gentlemen, today, the affirmative side has presented us a utopian picture where an international organization will ensure fair and equitable distribution of resources. However, this proposition is misguided and hinges on the fallacious belief that only a bureaucratic international organization could aptly solve the problem of scarce natural resources. Team Negative firmly stands against the motion that scarce world resources should be controlled by an international organization. Today we bring to you three major arguments. Number one, national sovereignty. Number two, the legitimacy of international organizations to assume control. And number three, the economic consequences of such an act. But before we get on to our points, there are some points that we must address that the first affirmative speaker has brought up to us. First of all, the affirmative side has unfairly defined international organizations to skew the debate in favor of their side, as according to our research, an international organization, according to the Vienna Convention, is an institutional agreement between members of an international system in order to achieve objectives according to systemic conditions, reflecting attributes, aspirations, and concerns of all its members. And in their debate, they have said that they have assumed a perfect international organization where they said, quote unquote, without any affiliation of any nation. And we do not see how it is possible when governments come together and create an international organization, how it would not have any affiliation with with a nation. Therefore, the definition they have provided is unfair for the negative side. In addition, now for the arguments, one of their biggest contentions was that the creation of an international organization would prevent competition. Yes, this is right, and as the negative side, we will illustrate why competition is essential for a thriving economy, and the eradication of competition would prove to be detrimental. First of all, competition is the fundamentals of the workings of a capitalistic society. Because of competitions, firms, businesses, individuals are motivated and incentivized to innovate, to create new inventions, and to make the world a better place. But without competitions, there is no incentive, and the negative side, the affirmative side, by getting rid of competition, is essentially creating a Marxist revolution or a communist state where individuals and companies have no incentive to make the world a better place, and by controlling these resources. In addition, the negative side has also revealed in the cross-examination that their example of the US and China's trade war is not an adequate example to use in this debate because essentially there are tariffs placed on steel and machinery, which in the scope of this motion, they are not natural resources. Therefore, their example is irrelevant to this debate. Having rebutted these points, I would now like to get on to our first argument, which is on national sovereignty. As it is outlined in the UN Charter, national sovereignty is a right and it should not be infringed upon. And by an international organization controlling natural resources that are within the geographical bounds of a country are essentially contradicting their own laws. And this is a fundamental flaw in the affirmative's argument. They're advocating for a creation of an international organization, but in the process, they're violating international law, and we do not see how this makes sense. We believe that the territorial integrity of every state is inviolate, and that international organizations does not have the right to overstep their boundaries, which leads us to our second argument, the legitimacy of international organizations. While the affirmative side has contended that this would create a more level playing field, we know that international organizations in reality are far from level. In fact, there are certain countries, such as more wealthier countries, have larger voting shares, and this means that international organizations cannot accurately reflect the attributes of each nation that there is. For example, in the UN Security Council, the permanent 5 nations have veto power over any resolution that can pass, and this shows that the international organizations themselves are unfairly skewed towards the Western and the rich countries, which directly contradicts their argument that the creation of an international organization would improve the previously Western-centric world order. We know the UN Security Council in the past had biased strategic interests and political motives, for example, protecting the oil-rich Kuwaitis in 1991, but failing to protect Rwandans from a genocide in 1997. And last of all, for a final argument, I would like to illustrate the detrimental economic consequences of creating an international organization. First and foremost, no single central organization can possibly understand the entire economy and allocate natural resources fairly. It's so complicated, and a centralized control of a resource could have detrimental consequences. Just look at the Soviet Union and how their planned economy failed. And even in this country of Ukraine itself, the consequences of Stalin's 5-year plan led to a famine of more than 6 million people. We see that planned economies never work. In a recent example, North Korea, for example, we know from history and from the past that control over resources cannot work, and we must live it up, and we must let the market forces determine what the price is according to the laws of supply and demand. Therefore, we believe that an international organization would do nothing to solve the problems that the world needs now, and therefore we are proud to oppose this motion. Thank you.
Thank you for your speech. Is the opposition not aware that one nation's thriving economy is at the expense of another nation's?
We do not see how your point is relevant to the debate.
Does the opposition agree that food such as agricultural produce is a natural resource?
Yes, if it is in the raw commodity state, yes, we believe that it's a natural resource.
Does the opposition not agree that agricultural machinery is operated to obtain natural resources such as food?
Yes, it certainly is. However, it is not a
Thank
scarce
you.
world resource because it's not natural. And this CISA debate, it was clear that scarce natural
Thank you.
resources encompass natural resources.
Is the opposition insinuating that food which is grown naturally in nature is not a natural resource?
We have never stated that. We have stated that agriculture
Thank you.
machinery is not a scarce resource.
Is the opposition not aware that our organization does not have a voting or veto system, unlike the United Nations?
But we're trying to say that your organization is an ideal one and a utopiastic one, which is practically based on hypothetical
So the
speculation
opposition
instead of
is
reality.
aware that our organization does not have a voting system?
The affirmative has not made this clear in our speech.
Thank you. Is the opposition not aware that our organization is not implementing a planned economy, simply a trade between countries?
The affirmative has clearly stated that, quote, the organization would control the allocation of resources, which is essentially what a planned economy is.
The opposition stated in their speech that the establishment of our organization is a violation of international law. May we ask which law this is?
In the UN Charter, it is included.
Thank you.
Good afternoon, honorable judges, esteemed opponents, and our audience. My name is Dawan Kim from the Istanbul International Community School, and I'm joined by my partner, Ling Ling Lee. To summarize my partner's points, she explained the importance of establishing a new international organization for the control of scarce world resources. She then outlined her vision of this new organization that would act as a broker agency in partnership with experienced humanitarian aid organizations such as Amnesty International and the Human Rights Watch. We, the affirmative team, would like to emphasize that creating this organization would not violate the principle of national sovereignty because member states would join on a voluntary or needed basis. As the second speaker, I will explain how a lack of an international organization and a predetermined allocation system will inevitably prompt geopolitical conflicts, as scarce world resources are not naturally distributed equally. These conflicts have the potential to cause multinational economic, socio-political, and humanitarian crises, which can be prevented by the implementation of the said international organization mentioned by my partner. Before we commence with stating our points, however, we would like to question some of the points brought up by our opponents. They mentioned the Vienna Convention's definition of international organization to oppose our definition of international organization. However, isn't this biased by its signatory countries and therefore presents a hypocritical argument because their definition is in fact skewed? And also they mentioned the Marxist revolution as a counter-argument to our points. However, this is implying a dictatorship. Multiple countries are leading in harmony in our organization that we frequently mention throughout our speech, and thus would like to ask why this is relevant to our moot. They also stated national sovereignty as a counter-argument for our points, and how we would like to emphasize that our new organization would not be violating international laws mentioned by our negative if countries are joining on a voluntary or needed basis. They also gave veto power as an example, which is a system in the United Nations. However, this is not relevant to our argument because our new organization is completely unaffiliated with the United Nations and will be leading on a separate guidelines. They also gave North Korea as an example of a failed economy. However, this is a national example. Our moot reads international organization, and thus this is not relevant to our argument. And they've also frequently disapproved and criticized communist countries. However, they're implying that implying and undermining the economic systems of these countries, and also favoring countries that are capitalist and follow the law of supply and demand. Also, the tariff example mentioned by my partner was clearly an example of economic malpractice, and thus the negative misinterpreted this as a mistake, and thus, although my partner was simply stating an example of economic malpractice to show how the new international organization can combat this issue. Now we would like to continue stating our points. To demonstrate the detrimental effects of geopolitical conflicts relating to resource distribution, we can examine the example of the ongoing resource war in the Democratic Republic of Congo. Congolese land was notable for its abundance of natural resources such as gold, diamonds, tin, ivory, and coltan, and were subjected to centuries of European colonialism due to their wealth. With information from articles combined from the BBC, the First and Second Congo War from 1996 to 2003 were first prompted by the Rwandan government's attempt to oust the ineffective Congolese president they had placed in power, who they believed to be an obstacle in maintaining their political and economic interests in Congo. Soon, Zimbabwe, Uganda, Namibia, Sudan, Chad, Libya, and Angola joined the two countries in a proxy war, but were accused of having ulterior motives to attain the natural resources in Congo. This was shown to be accurate as the Rwandan and Ugandan troops engaged in warfare in the city of Kisangani, which is an important site in the Congo lucrative diamond trade. As the war continued, the parties began to focus on gaining access to the extraction and sale of these resources. Although a peace treaty ended the war in 2003, militant rebel groups like the Democratic Forces for the Liberation of Rwanda and the Ugandan Allied Democratic Forces continued to finance their terrorist activities by exploiting Congo's natural resources. My partner, Ling Ling, proposed in her speech that this organization would regulate natural resource allocation on a regional level. This aspect would have been beneficial in preventing the multinational war in the Central African region, which disrupted the political atmosphere of almost 10 countries. In contrast with the example of the Congolese wars, the exchange of timber between Ethiopia and Australia in 1894 is a key historical example that supports the necessity of an international body for resource distribution. This information is compiled from a report published by the University of Botswana. In 1894, when the Emperor of Ethiopia ordered the capital to be moved to Addis Ababa, the country faced issues of massive deforestation around the city, which resulted in the lack of firewood for industrial purposes. The emperor was given eucalyptus trees from Australia, which are known to be highly adaptive and fast-growing. Thus, through this exchange, Ethiopia was able to reforestate Addis Ababa and use the timber from the eucalyptus trees to build infrastructure in the new capital city. The action of gifting the renewable sources of trees proved to be highly beneficial to Ethiopia, in which timber was considered a scarce resource. Therefore, the implementation of this national agency would further help interactions like these to flourish through its efficiency and multinational collaboration. Thus, we, the affirmative team, firmly believe that the agency working in collaboration with the Human Rights Watch and Amnesty International will be instrumental in preventing and resolving prominent conflicts of resource distribution in a global scale. As my partner has stated, intergovernmental bodies such as the EU have previously stated that the competition for natural resources is an international challenge. Thus, this broker organization would be able to effectively address this issue and provide massive benefits to the international community. Thus, we are affirmative in our stance that scarce world resources should be controlled by an international organization. Thank you.
Thank you for your speech. Why is the affirmative side suggesting the creation of a new international organization rather than making use of existing ones?
We stated this because there are no present international organizations that are successful and prominent in the media.
All right, thank you. And are you aware that Amnesty International and Human Rights Watch are already existing international organizations and a subdivision of the UN?
However, the negative is not aware that these organizations are not only focused on resource distribution, and therefore the compilation of these organizations.
And if these already existing organizations like Amnesty International and the United Nations, like as the negative has mentioned, if they were not successful in combating this problem, what makes you think that your organization would be successful as well?
We did not mention the United Nations in our partnership. However, we mentioned that this would be a collaboration of multiple countries, such as 193 countries who are member states of the United Nations.
International organizations were not effective in combating these problems. What makes you think that a creation of a new one would?
We previously answered that question in our previous answer, and you, Mr.
All right, and you said that member states would join voluntarily, therefore would not be breaching national sovereignty. What would happen if a nation decided not to join?
This is completely based on needed or voluntary basis, but a country would definitely want to join because they're...
So if a country decided not to join, then would the international organization still take control over its resources?
The negative has stated the national sovereignty in their argument, so they're contradicting our argument with using national sovereignty for being hypocritical.
What would happen if a member state...
We already stated that this organization would be on a voluntary needed basis, and therefore this is clear in our argument.
Okay, it's a voluntary basis, and you said it would control the world's resources. What if one country in the world decided not to join? Would the power of this international organization extend to that country who decided not to join as well?
This organization would obviously want to have other countries, but the countries would obviously want to join if they're receiving resources in return for trading their resources.
And could you please clarify your point that they would not have any affiliation with any nations?
We did not say that.
In their speech, the affirmative side countered our points that national sovereignty would not be infringed upon in their international organization. They further used the Democratic Republic of Congo as an example to illustrate the conflicts that resources supposedly engender and why an international organization would be in place and enable these types of conflicts to go away and help the Democratic Republic of Congo. Right now in this speech, I will counter these points before first moving on to my main arguments. When questioned about their international organization not infringing upon the national sovereignty of other countries, they stated that the organization would simply be based on a needed or voluntary basis. What does the word need mean? Needed by who? Other countries? And if it's on a needed basis, then is that implying that other countries would decide if it was needed and thus exercise their extraneous influence upon the sovereignty of this country? They further used the Democratic Republic of Congo as an example in where colonialism went wrong. But think about it from the eyes of a common African citizen residing in the Democratic Republic of Congo, as this need would result in international organizations possibly coercing this country and strip away their authority that they maintain over their own resources. Regardless of the motivation or the end result, what a simple citizen would see is that once again, their resources are being stripped from them for the purpose of another international or governing body. Furthermore, the affirmative side also stated that the Democratic Republic of Congo, and specifically, suffered extremely from conflicts relating to resource problems, and that currently it was not benefiting at all from these resources. And although this may be true, the negative side views the Democratic Republic of Congo as an extreme example that does not reflect the rest of world affairs. As they themselves delineated in their history of Congo, colonialism played a huge aspect in this country's development and resulted in the deaths of millions while stripping the land of the resources. There is not another example to the severity of Congo in place. And by further stating that this international organization would take away conflict, they're presenting an erroneous argument, as a lot of the resource allocation and the conflict itself is based intrinsically with the military of the DRC, which in itself is actively participating in the looting and exploitation of common citizens. Moving on to my own arguments, the delegation failed to mention how they could incentivize a nation to aptly join their international organization. In the Democratic Republic of Congo, the negative side is aware that 1/5 of all resource revenues are lost to corruption every year. That's $200 million. If the government which is in power is the one that is in charge or behind this corruption, then why would they have any desire to lose place over the very profitable venture they have in their country? Why would they remove their authority and place it to a more transparent international organization? Furthermore, the vagueness of the term scarce resources itself is one argument that cannot be refuted. While one country may, for example, have a high scarcity in water and may be suffering water problems like Libya currently is, another nation, for example, Sweden, has a very efficient system of water transportation and does not suffer from this at all. The delegation did state that this international organization would operate on a regional basis. However, they did not stipulate how this would work, who would compose the regional basis, and if they didn't, then there's the very possibility that the panels of judges, or the panels of the people presiding over this, have no direct connect to their everyday life in these countries and would not be able to understand how this works. I will present to you the economic consequences of this international organization. As previously in the past, an organization like OPEC, the Organization of Petroleum Exporting Countries, which was an international organization which bonded together to monopolize the oil markets, precipitated the oil shock in the 1980s by limiting the supply of oil to other countries. OPEC itself was the result of stripping private companies from their drilling rights in these nations, and by stripping the privatization and in fact enforcing a monopoly, they caused great harm to the rest of the world in the 1980s. There are examples of countries that have successfully managed their economy. For example, Norway. Today in our world, Norway is considered by the UN to have the fourth highest per capita income in the world. On the CIA's per capita list, it ranks as number 11. It has the world's largest sovereign wealth fund with a value of $1 trillion US. Norway has also held the highest Human Development Index ranking since the world in 2009. And this is unequivocally linked to its management of natural resources, including both oil and nickel. By limiting their exportation of both these resources and understanding that there is a problem in the world, Norway has not only created a substantial economy based off of a diversity of other resources which they have built off the platform that these resources have bestowed upon them, but they also show that they've understood the problem and that countries themselves are more apt to fix the problem than an international organization which would be bogged down by bureaucracy, inefficiency, and the problems that all of this would entail. And that is why we believe an international organization simply could not function.
First of all, thank you for your speech. We'd like to ask how would this new international organization be stripping the DR Congo of its resources if it would join on a voluntary needed basis that was frequently mentioned in my partner and my speech?
I stated that if the DRC were to willingly subject themselves to this, then they wouldn't be stripping. But the fact that in your speech you stated the word needed
if the DR Congo was joining on a voluntary basis, wouldn't they be aware of these implications that can occur to them, but still they would have joined anyways?
Perhaps, but my argument entailed that I don't see how the DRC would join on a voluntary basis.
That the British extraction of palm oil in Nigeria and other examples of other LEDCs in Africa show that the DR Congo example is not an exaggeration?
The delegation stated that not an exaggeration. It understands the conflict of scarce resources, but that the DRC was an extreme example, the worst in the world.
In what sense were they extreme?
An extreme example in the amount of resources exploited, the deaths caused. The Second Congo War caused 5.4 million deaths.
And the amount of resources in DR Congo further explain why this international organization is completely needed?
The question isn't whether it is needed, it is whether it would work.
Would the opponent like to explain why their definition of resource scarcity is less vague than our definition?
The opponent did not provide a definition for resource scarcity. I simply stated that the scarcity of resources fluctuates on a region-to-region basis.
Thank you. You mentioned OPEC as an example of a resource distribution organization. However, they simply distribute oil and not other natural resources. So how is this relevant to our mood?
Because oil is a natural resource with increasing scarcity.
Thank you. So would you agree that Ethiopia and Australia's trade of eucalyptus trees mentioned in my speech is an example of multinational collaboration that can be furthered by our organization?
Perhaps.
Thank you.
Okay, guys, so those were the first 4 constructive speeches of the affirmative and negative from Istanbul and Sophia. Now, just a reminder about interrupting that you might have seen in these heated question segments. Actually, it is the question asker who decides when answers satisfy the question, and so it is the question asker who can stop the speaker and say thank you, and then move on to the next question. And so it is wrong for the person answering the question to keep answering or interrupt the question asker, but we'll see if the judges grade them down on that. For now, it's a 90-second round. They're talking to each other and scribbling down notes. And after this, it will be back to the affirmative for their cross-examination, which is a 2-minute speech. One of the speakers has a 2-minute speech to look over all the clashes so far in this debate and to ultimately persuade the judges that it is, in fact, their team that won this debate. So the final notes, the final seconds on the clock ticking, and it will be one of the Istanbul members to go back up to the podium, and here they are.
Honorable judges, esteemed opponents, and audience. A major clash point in this debate was the effective allocation of scarce natural resources. The affirmative has stated that their international organization would adequately and fairly distribute natural resources, while the negative has clearly demonstrated why this would not work. First of all, there is no definite standard of worldwide scarcity. This is the nature of scarcity itself. A scarce resource in one country may not be scarce in another, and this mismatch between countries ensues that there's no way to gauge a need of a country as the affirmative has so proposed. Second of all, one of the biggest contentions in this debate was the question of the Democratic Republic of Congo, and as the negative side has demonstrated, this is an extreme example, and it is not true on a worldwide basis. For example, we have brought up the example of Norway, a country that has effectively managed its natural resources to fuel and promote its economic growth. Therefore, it is clear that across the globe, not all countries suffer from these problems, and to allow an international organization to seize control over scarce natural resources would not be infringing upon national sovereignty and violating territorial integrity. It would be stripping these countries like Norway, who effectively managing their resources, of these benefits. And throughout the debate, we have shown why a centralized planned economy and allocation of resources by a central organization would not be effective, as this is akin to communism, and as we have seen from examples from history, such as the Soviet Union, even if the international organization is not corrupt, which is not possible in the first place, one organization simply cannot gauge the economic needs of countries across the globe, and they wouldn't realize that they're allocating too little or too much until problems will eventually surface. And therefore, the negative side believes that we clearly take this debate home. Thank you.
My bad. That was just the Budapest negative team who did their cross-examination, and now it will be Istanbul with their cross-examination. Speaker 1, Ling Li.
Good afternoon, honorable judges, esteemed opponents, and our audience. We, the affirmative team, are pleased to conclude our debate today and show how we clearly need an international organization to control our scarce natural resources. However, before we summarize our points, we would like to emphasize how the opposition falsely conflated our organizations such as the UN with our organization. We iterate that first, the United Nations does indeed have a skewed veto system. However, our organization is a third-party, unbiased, unaffiliated organization, meaning that we do not have these flaws that are in the United Nations. Furthermore, the control of our organization only extends to voluntary nations who have joined. However, we do not see why any nation would not be willing to participate in possibly the first time in history of the fair exchange of scarce natural resources. How can there be a greater incentive to join this organization than an alternative, morally just, and mutually beneficial exchange of resources? Furthermore, the opposition repeatedly states how the example we used with Congo is too extreme. Is the death of 5.4 million people not enough to promote an organization that has the full capability to prevent such atrocities in the future? As our organization can effectively eliminate resource competitions, which are one of the greatest security risks in our century now, we believe that our organization is a clear, peaceful mutually beneficial, and more importantly, long-term solution to the effective distribution of natural resources, which would better the globe as a whole and not only individual nations. Thank you.
Hey guys, so we're back here in the booth, me and Dima. You guys just watched Istanbul versus Budapest with their debate in room 11. That was a really heated debate, lots of very good questions back and forth. I really like what I saw. Already much higher quality than the first round, don't you agree?
Yeah, like the teams are heating up, and some of the rules were a bit expanded in the second round, but that's what you expect from speech and debates. Like when your arguments does not agree with each other, there will be clashes, and there will be disagreements, and of course sometimes you forget about the rules. So I don't. Of course, judges will take off points because of that, but I think like breaking the rules in some points, that would make speech and debates very interesting.
Yeah. So we just got some information about the points that came. So this is for round 2C, which is oral. Anyways, we just got the information that basically Sofia has a cumulative point of 54, just 6 points shy of a perfect score, which is quite amazing, really. And then second place, Istanbul, G3 with 48 points, just 12 shy. Vilnius, F1, 46 in third place. It says this was round 2C. This was the oral interpretation. That's right, oral interpretation round 2, which we will be covering on the live stream next, by the way. In fact, the next stream will be we'll tell you at the beginning of the next show. So this is signing off, but first we're going to show you a video of some more highlights from earlier today.
Stay tuned. So we have some technical issues in producing the video, so we'll spend a couple of more seconds with you. So let's talk about the second round of oral interpretation that will be coming next. How do you think it will be different to the first round?
So oral interpretation, that's one of those things you can change between rounds, just improve. And so I think people are going to feed off each other's inspiration. I think those people who showed tremendous performance with, voice changes to demonstrate the different characters will inspire the others. And I hope to see some more of that, distinguishing between characters. So we're going to watch that. But first, let's see a video of some highlights.
Presley Forrest. Doing debate and what other event?
Original oratory.
Original oratory. How have the rounds gone so far?
Our first round went pretty good. It was a win and a loss, and then original oratory went good too.
So we just had original oratory and debate was the first round. Well, that sounds really good. Looks like you're making progress. Do you see yourself getting into the finals, debate, original oratory?
Original oratory I can see, debate and lecture.
Okay, alright. Well, yeah, debate competition is really high pressure. I agree. I did that myself in middle school. I can imagine it's even tougher in high school. So, what do you think about, skipping school and doing this instead?
I'm just glad not to do schoolwork.
We're here in the Moody booth, getting guest Moody ready for their rounds. What's your name?
I'm Vesta Meshna, and I'm from the Anglo-American School of Sofia.
Awesome. She beat me to the question. From Sofia. Okay, Sofia, you are the Wolves, correct?
Yes.
Okay, Wolves. So, and which events are you participating in?
In debate with the boy that you were interviewing earlier, Matteo, and in original oratory.
Matteo and original oratory. Those have been my favorite events this tournament. We watched them all. We really enjoyed them. We loved the speeches you made and the debates. And well, we have an interesting question. How do you like your hosts?
I like them a lot. They're very nice.
What specifically make them qualify as very nice?
They're very polite to us, and they're very good.
Are those the best qualities of a host?
Yes, I think.
Have you hosted people?
Yes.
What do you do for them when you host them?
I am nice to them, and I make sure that they feel at home for those 3 days.
Awesome. And do you feel at home here in the school and in the tournament? That's great. That's exactly what we want. Do you think your parents are watching?
No.
You want to say hi to anybody?
Hi, everybody. Like, basically just.
All right. I think she's in the mood for the next round. Well,
In the mood for
we get
moving,
going.
like, in 20 minutes.
Yeah.
So,
Okay.
yeah.
Well, good luck. Get prepared and best of luck.
What is your name and where are you from?
My name is Matthias Meyer and I'm from the American International School of Budapest.
Nice. And in what events are you participating?
I'll be doing debate and impromptu.
So you've participated already, yeah?
Yeah, I've done one debate and one impromptu.
And what do you think on your performance? Do you think you did well?
Thus far I think I've done pretty well. Consistently come across as presenting my best qualities and my strengths to the judges.
And speaking generally about Kiev, do you like this city or something you dislike about it?
Well, actually, it's my 4th time in Kiev for CISA.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, so there are definitely parts I like of the city. Some of it is beautiful. I think sometimes the roads can be a little bad and it snows a lot, but it's a great city.
And you sound really confident when you talk about this tournament. Have you been in a speech and debate before?
Actually, no, I have not. This is my first speech and debate tournament.
Yeah. And was there any nervousness like at the beginning?
Of course, at first, just making sure that you do the best that you can. You want to win, obviously, but that goes away after a while.
And the final question that we asked all of our guests, what do you think of your host?
Well, my host family actually, they're quite generous. They allowed us to print in their home, which is something that I'm quite grateful to them for.
Like printing is a big issue in this
especially for a debate, but no, they've been great so far. The food has been great and the best comes from them.
And who is it? It's not a secret.
Well, actually, at this point in time, it is a secret. No, I'm Grigory.
Grigory.
Yeah.
Hello, Grigory. Thank you for being a great guide and hosting our guest. Okay, thank you. Have a good.
There are.